Hey, Ecology, it's Dr. Welch. And for this last component of our second unit of the course on ecosystems, let's take a look at how these ecosystems change over time and thereby add a strong temporal component to our ecological studies. So what we're going to be looking at with this change over time are we're going to focus on one of what I call the races that occurs within an ecosystem. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the process of succession. So successional responses to environmental change are brought on by the organisms found in the ecosystem, as well as changes in nutrient cycling. And these are happening at the same time, and honestly on a faster time scale for most ecosystems, as are selectional responses to environmental change or natural selection. And the way we want to tie this out to global climate change is as the environment is changing so rapidly in the current period that we're in, this rapid change with climate change in many ecosystems is much faster than the pace of the successional responses that are, if you will, normal or adaptive for that ecosystem, as well as the adaptive process of natural selection. And so this is why many ecosystems are in trouble right now, especially those up against the polar ice caps. Our Arctic tundra, as well as the northern edge of the boreal forest. We're seeing a lot of the things that are normally in sync or tied together in those biomes, they're breaking apart. And it's the fact that the environment is changing faster than the rate of succession and indeed the rate of natural selection can keep up with. So when we talk about succession, it can be broken down into two types. Primary succession is one that occurs, as I say, on bare rock, whereas secondary succession occurs where a disturbance has cleared the vegetation, and then the vegetation has reestablished itself from seeds that are located in the seed bank in the soil or that blow in on the wind from surrounding intact ecosystems. And we're going to look from this trajectory from the pioneer community, the very early successional community, through the aging process, if you will, to what's called the climax community, or what you can consider old age for an ecosystem. And we're going to focus in with our study guide questions on the changes in ecosystem biomass, primary production, rates of respiration and nutrient retention, as well as community species composition over time. So many of the processes we've been discussing, we're going to look at how there are changes in these processes. Some stages of succession, you have higher primary production than you do in other stages. So we're going to be looking at these factors within our ecosystem. The two ecosystems you're going to spend most of the time focusing on are located in Glacier Bay, Alaska. One of our examples of primary succession, with the younger sites being exposed as the glacier retreats, the older ecosystems or the older sites being located further away from the edge of the ice, as well as the clear cutting example representing secondary succession from the Hubbard Brook experiment. So most of his examples are from those two locations, Glacier Bay in Alaska or the Hubbard Brook experimental forest. And again, with both, you're going to be looking at the changes in that previous list of ecosystem characteristics over a long trajectory of time, in particular for Glacier Bay. The other kind of succession we're going to study in class is oldfield succession, which is very common in the southeastern United States and is why I like to include it in our course. This is a type of succession where here in the southeast we had forested ecosystems that were cleared and replaced by agricultural operations. Then as those agricultural operations were abandoned, it starts the area on this pattern of what's called oldfield succession. And this was a sector of ecology worked out by two wonderful women, both of whom unfortunately are gone. Catherine Keever, who worked out at Duke University, and Elsie Quarterman out of Vanderbilt. Elsie Quarterman passed away just a few years ago at the ripe old age. She was either 101 or 102 when she passed away. So being an ecologist is a good life. But they went throughout the southeastern United States studying these abandoned agricultural farms and put together this amazing body of work that goes through not only the changes in plant composition over time, but how those plants indeed are impacting and changing the environment that facilitates the establishment of the next species in the sequence. Really neat stuff, and we'll do an in-class activity on it. So to wrap this introduction up, community and ecosystem stability, in other words, how stable an ecosystem is, how long it stays in the same state, may be due to a lack of disturbance or what's called community resistance or resilience in the face of disturbance. So in other words, it tends to be relatively disturbance-free, or it tends to bounce back quickly following a disturbance. So you can think of stability, again, as the absence of change. Ecological stability is that persistence of a community or an ecosystem in the face of disturbance. And again, that can be due to resistance, the ability of a community or ecosystem to maintain structure and function in the face of potential disturbance. Think of a desert, okay? The biggest disturbance that you have in deserts are flooding. And most of the vegetation is not destroyed during those flooding events. So the community is very resistant to the damage of the disturbance. Our other mechanism for ecological stability over time is resilience. And this is what we see with the forests of the southeastern United States. The ability of the community or ecosystem to bounce back and recover quickly after a disturbance. And so it's this very quick return to the former state. And that is why we study succession, because succession is the basis of resilience.